Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first of our Green Defenders Network meetings. My name's Ian Ashman. I'm the Honorary Secretary and the Trustee of CPRE London. I volunteered to be a link with the Trust Board, and as a result, I've been volunteered to chair this meeting. So it's great to have so many people with us today. There's a few colleagues for you to know. So one is Clive, who's volunteered to take notes and help us with our newsletter. Clive is engaged with the campaign at Wimbledon. And then, very importantly, we've got a guest speaker today from Warren Farm, who's Katie, and we'll come to Katie in a little while. And then we've got Alice Roberts, who is going to give us a bit of an introduction. Just a couple of pieces of administration. So we are deliberately trying to keep these meetings to an hour so people can fit them in at lunchtime. We're recording the meeting. That recording has started now. If you're not happy with the recording, then don't join in. If I can ask you to mute, except when you're talking. And we will have some time for people to share thoughts, questions, ask for help in the second half of the hour. But it would be helpful if you could indicate in the chat or by putting up your hand if you'd like to do that, so we can keep to time. And I warn you, I shall be vicious about keeping people to time and keeping contributions short so we can hear from all of those who'd like to. So welcome once again, and I'm going to hand over to Alice now to do a bit more of an introduction.
Thanks. So I was mainly going to just talk about Warren Farm very briefly, but just to say very quickly that we decided to start the Green Defenders Network on the back of the recent publication of our second report about threats to green spaces in London, or our second big report. We did, in fact, do reports before that. So this is really just, our first meeting. So we're delighted to have so many people here. The intention is that we have a network, which just means that you would sign up to an email, and Ian can talk to you about that in a bit later. And that we have meetings probably quarterly, but we're kind of in a suck it and see stage. So we'll see what people would like, and feel free to write in the chat what you'd like to get out of this, and then we can figure it out as we go along. But certainly we felt that there was a lot of interest in having a network. So to move swiftly along to Warren Farm. So this was one of the very first cases that I was involved with when I came to CPRE London, probably eight years ago, I think now. And at the time it was under threat from development of QPR's training ground, which may not seem too bad, I suppose, from a green perspective, but actually it would have completely removed the natural surface, and there would have been buildings, and there would of course have been no public access, or no affordable public access, and certainly not open ground. So we campaigned alongside local people at the time, and eventually they stood down. But really the reason that this is a particularly interesting case for me is that it just demonstrates how clearly what happens when a piece of land doesn't really have a clear identity. Because those playing fields, which they were playing fields many years ago, had been left unused for so long that it lacked a clear identity. The site had no identity, and Katie really picks up the story from there, and how they've come to work to create an identity for it. So I think my input is really about how we're so worried about the very many sites around London, which in many ways are like Warren Farm and have no clear identity at the moment and are coming under threat. So this is Katie's story. Well, the story of Warren Farm, I should say. Katie.
Oh, hello. Thank you, Alice. That was a really lovely introduction. Yeah, so my name's Katie. I'm a trustee for the Brent River Park, and I am the Warren Farm Nature Reserve campaign organizer. And when Alice asked me if I would come along and talk today, I was like, yeah, of course, great, more than happy to do that. And she said, you know, talk about social media and the recent success and how you feel your campaign got there. And I picked up my notepad, I grabbed my pen, and I was like, how did we get here? Because there was no master plan. We were, you know, relatively new to this. We'd never done this before. And so what I've done is I've pulled out what I see as sort of 7 key moments and steps that kind of was the journey to get us where we are now. And they kind of escalate one on top of the other. They sort of have a knock-on effect. And so I'm just going to speed through these. I'm going to speed through them like I'm on my 2nd litre of coffee, and just talk about the journey, and hopefully there'll be some steps within this that you might find useful for your own campaigns. Okay, so the first step, step 1, was research, and that was about knowing exactly what species you have and what you're fighting for. And to help us do that, we had to ask experts to come and have a look at our site for us. So locally, the community, we knew that we had skylarks here. They're really obvious. They sing beautifully. They fly around in the sky. They nest on the ground. Everybody knew about them. But there are species that we discovered here that were less obvious, that would only take an expert eye to spot it. So we had a local botanist called Peter Edwards, who I begged, after picking up a dog poo outside of his front gate and bumping into him, and I begged him to come and take wildflower records for me on Warren Farm, and he did. And through that, we found a species called copse bindweed. And copse bindweed is on the NERC Act, which means it's a plant that's going extinct across the whole of the UK. So every single site where that plant is, it's only in 2 sites in London, is really relevant to stop, you know, its extinction from happening. So when you bring an expert eye in, it's amazing to do because you walk around and you suddenly see your site in a way you'd never seen it before as well. You can then use that understanding to garner interest from supporters. And then you start to encourage amateur recorders to get involved as well. So from that, we found a spider through Julian Oliver called the Thanatos striatus, which was a first for Middlesex. And by finding exactly what you're protecting, what happens is you can then share that publicly and share it with other experts who have specific interests in that area. And then they want to come and visit your site. And then through that, that kind of grows your sort of network of people that want to ensure that your site is saved. And on top of that, what's really, really important, I can't stress this enough for Warren Farm, is when you take species records on your site, is to submit those records to places like Giggle. In London, it's Giggle, which is the Green Space Information Centre for Greater London, because any records you put into that recording body, developers have to go to Giggle to see what's already there. So it's a really useful thing to do. Also, ask Giggle for what records they already have. So give Giggle a call, give them your postcode, tell them the area that you want, and they will send you any species records that have already been recorded on your site. And you might just find locally, there's a sort of secret sort of botanist or a secret birder who's been submitting records that you don't know about that they'll have. So it's a really useful thing to do. It takes about a year. You want to do it at least over the year. Do it now because it's springtime to look for those species. And, you know, species records helped form the basis of the court case, which allowed us to get judicial review, where the council failed to undertake environmental impact assessment. Previously, there were no records in Giggle at all of what was here. By undertaking those records with experts and locals helping amateurs to help, it made a huge difference. And I think what happens with that with the social media is that people can't care about what they don't know. So, and that includes counsellors. So when you reach out to try and find experts, when you approach the big wildlife organizations, don't be too surprised if from the start of that, they don't sort of rush to help you or send loads of people out. It can be quite frustrating when you first start and a bit upsetting too. But you kind of have to understand that a lot of these big wildlife organizations, they have very little money. They're quite short-staffed and they get hundreds of requests for help every single day. So what you need to do is essentially do the groundwork for them. And that's about finding people off social media, finding local expert and local knowledge. In our case, we had the Brent River Canal Society charity, which had experts within that as well, which was really, really helpful. You can then ask them for statements of support. And what you can do is make it easy. I'm going to say that so many times through this, make it easy. When you're contacting the wildlife organizations to tell them about what you have, take all the photos, show them that it's there, invite them to come and meet you. They might not straight away, but you have to persist and just keep going to show that you're not just someone who's just ringing and then is going to forget about it because they don't feel empowered to make that change. So we give them bullet points. You know, if you could please give us a statement of support outlining like these 3 things because it's relevant to your charity, that would be amazing for us. And there's a really generous nature community on Twitter /X, whatever that is now. And, you know, we found, Kabir found us because we put a tweet out about skylarks. He was 12 at the time when he saw it, and he came and walked with us. And now he's 18, and he's been with our campaign all of that time from the very beginning. And that was purely down to Twitter and just consistently putting messaging out. And we've had experts like Sophie Le Gouel, who's then like, oh, I'm going to flag this up with Mark A. Spencer, and so on and so forth. So a lot of the nature experts do know one another. And that's really helpful because then they bring each other on board. So species recording brings in expert interest. It unites the community. It creates content, which keeps the conversation going. And it shows the value of what it is you're trying to protect. And there might be things there you don't know that are really important. So always go to the expert advice. And that leads to the second thing, which is then what do you do with the knowledge when you've got it, which is what I call the big share. So we did 2 things. The first thing we did is set a vision. And the second thing we did was set up some platforms. So the vision was exactly what Alice just mentioned there, which is about what is the identity of this place? What do we want? And don't be afraid to go big. So what is the big positive idea? So for us, we wanted Warren Farm as a local nature reserve, but not just Warren Farm. We wanted all the surrounding Brent River Park meadows. Go big, that's 5 in total. You know, you might get 1, but you might get 5, which we have. So you just have to sort of persist and don't be afraid to, you know, think big and really ask for everything that you want. Within that positive idea and that vision and that thinking, another thing I've learned through the trustees for Brent River Park is to include within it what we call sort of like easy wins, like small little things. These are things that the council can be doing that will look good and that will help benefit your cause in some way, but they're small little things. So you're not just constantly only getting to do the big thing. So we got some funding. We found the funding, we went to the council and said, look, we've got this bit of funding. Can we take this fencing down to create greater connectivity? And they did. So, you know, set a sort of series of goals, if you like, within your vision. In terms of the platform and sharing the knowledge, we've got a lot of love for Warren Farm. Our community absolutely, you know, adore this site. And so we set up a Facebook group, a Twitter account, and an Instagram account. And then what happens is the community start to share their photos and their knowledge and what they've seen on the site with us, which then creates content which we can share across all the different platforms. So if someone puts a post on Facebook about something they've seen, I can take that and put it on Twitter and vice versa. And then suddenly your job where you were sort of the 1 or 2 people doing everything then becomes much easier because you've got a whole community creating content for you. And it's about sharing that knowledge in a way, I suppose, it is both easy and accessible. So tell the story, you know, give a little bit of heart, I suppose, about why it's important. What's the sort of defining thing of that creature or that photo you just shared? So, you know, we've got ladies' bed straw. It smells amazing. When you come and visit, get down on your knees, give it a smell, you know. It's like sort of just inject that sort of the wonderment of it, because nature is wonderment and we're all trying to protect that in some way. And it will encourage people to go, oh, I really want to smell that. So all those sorts of things are really useful to do. And what else was I going to say? We started a petition, which then sort of helps spread the love of it, and it just keeps that conversation going. A petition share is a really easy thing for supporters to do. And the more numbers you get, the better. And tonally, it's been interesting for us. As a charity, we're not there to sort of scream and sort of shout and get angry, although we do, but we do that at home into a pillow. So we try to keep the tone positive, hopeful, factual, and also firm. You know, there has to be times you have to stand up and be like, actually, Ealing Council or whoever the council you're with, you know, this isn't so good and here's why. But we try to keep the tone really positive to encourage people to want to get involved. And then that leads to the third thing, which is about finding your team. Because you'll notice what happens then as you grow, that key people start to stand out. So we have people of different ages, backgrounds and abilities, all of which are volunteers in the Warren Farm Nature Reserve team. And then we have the charity support as well. So we've got those two running alongside each other. You're looking for doers, essentially. People who, we've got a graphic designer, we have an engineer, we have a filmmaker, a legal person, we have writers, and we've got people who are prepared to sort of go through council documents, which can be really, really long. As you all know, you get pages of council documents, it's like thousands, hundreds of pages long with really like difficult language. And you have to go through, pull it out, simplify it, make it easy. Make it easy for your supporters. Your average person isn't going to go and spend, as much as they care about a space or a creature, they don't have the time or energy to spend just going through thousands of things. So you have to do that for them, and you pull it out and you whack it in a blog, and you just share it widely, and you add things like the email address of the councillors that they need to email it to. You bullet point out like 5 things. Make it really easy for your supporters to get across to councillors and to keep the pressure up of what it is that you want to see happen. And that's also not just looking at Ealing policies particularly, but looking at London-wide policies. So looking at the London plan and pulling those sort of aspects into it as well. And that goes into point 4, which is, I call this one persistent truths. So point 4 is about persistent truths. And that is about doing social media every day social media. Congratulations, you now have a part-time job because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, but it's so important you build up a picture of what you're trying to protect and why with the story. It's about educating, but also intriguing. What I've learned about social media is tagging is really, really important. Who you tag in your post. Now, you can only tag in photos and films. You can't tag using website links to things. So when you tag a photo, you get 10 options on Twitter, use them all, and then find the relevant people to tag in it. And then what you'll do over time is you'll start to create a little list of people that are major taggers that have big, followers who will share it, but also specialist people. If you're going to do a photo of a spider, make sure you tag in the BAS. For example. So I try to sort of get a different range of people within the tag group, from the major retweeters who care a lot about wildlife and nature and have big following, down to the expert people, and then maybe that one person who hasn't got back to me yet. I'm just like, I'm just going to drop this tag in just to make you aware we're still here and we think this is relevant to you. So tagging is super important, and it's a slow build for sure. And again, there's amazing people out there that will support you. The other thing with social media I found useful is to look at hashtags, particularly trending hashtags. There's some hashtags environmentally that are really stronger and important, or get big followings, or a sort of link into the sort of people that you're hoping to get, their support and attention from. So one of those, for example, is, I love this one, is the hashtag Wildflower Hour, which happens every Sunday. And then you get the more sort of common ones like hashtag Friday Feeling and things like that. We also create our own hashtag. So in every single tweet we do, hashtag OneFarmNR, hashtag OneFarmNR. repeat, repeat, repeat. I mark every photo with our Twitter handle. Should our photos go and get shared anywhere else, you're then bringing those people back to your campaign. We thank and credit every photographer as well in every tweet we ever do. And you have to expect some negative comments. That is just part of life. And sometimes there's people out there that want the opposite to what you want, or that don't care about the things that you care about, or that simply don't understand, or just want to fight, quite honestly, on Twitter. And with those, we found that the sort of rude people who are just there to be rude, you can just ignore them, and your supporters tend to step in on your behalf, quite honestly, so you don't have to give that any energy. But the ones who perhaps don't quite get it, I always invite them to come closer and to come for a walk. I always invite them for a walk. And if they still don't get it and they're still publicly tweeting 10 tweets later, I'll be like, hey, inviting you for that walk again. That invite is still open. And they come. Ultimately, eventually they come and they walk around and they'll be grumpy, but then they get it. And then you've gained yourself a supporter, and you've gained yourself someone who's really active on social media to stand up for you instead of doing the opposite. So that is certainly always worth doing. I made a lot of friends that way, actually. But persistent truths every day, every single day, you've got to do it. That leads on to 5, which is about events. And events is making it people-based, because everything up until now has been about the wildlife aspect of it, which of course is majorly important. But people aspect of it is really important too, especially for counsellors and for us, is important. So that's about doing events like nature walks, showing the community using the space, how the community use the space for well-being, for mental health, for physical exercise, how the space helps us with the climate crisis, how the space helps us ask the council to honour their biodiversity action plans. And all of that is good. We also, as an event, we had to do a protest at some point. Don't be afraid to do protests. And I wouldn't be afraid to call yourself an activist. Activism, I think, maybe 10 years ago was a bit of a dirty word. But these days, I think you're well within your rights to call yourself an activist. I think it's actually really important and to be brave in doing that. And what I found with the social media is, when you put out a tweet or a post on wildlife, the wildlife gets more attraction than posts we put out with people in it, messaging wise. But it's really important to still do both. So I probably do about 2/3 wildlife and 1/3 or 1/4 people in that aspect. That might not be true for everyone, but we've found that with the Warren Farm Nature Reserve campaign. And of course, supporters are voters. And that then sort of built into, once we were doing all those events and the protests and all the rest of it, that then attracted the politics towards us, and all the different political parties wanted to find out more and get involved, which was great, because as a charity, we're apolitical and we ask everyone to support us. We'll take support from anybody, quite honestly. And politics, without a doubt, is the hardest thing about it. But it's also the only thing that can turn a bad decision into a good one. So it's really worth embracing it. And it's finding out about what do they want, and what are their environmental policies, and how can we be the ones to help them reach their goals whilst also getting our campaign and our land secured and safe. One of the big issues we had was councillors coming to Warren Farm and looking at it and just seeing it as this mown piece of land. And to them, it's like, oh, we've been told it's a wasted space. It's useless. And they see it as somewhere they can develop, or where something else should be to sort of make money in a way. And so what we did was we decided, well, our young naturalists, we brought them along, and they're doing the Duke of Edinburgh Award. And we invited councillors to come and do a walk with them. And they were 14 years old, and they did an amazing job. And the councillors came and they helped them get their Duke of Edinburgh Award, which looks good for the councillors. It helps the local school and the local children. It educates and it gets the message across. And I think that was a bit of a turning point for us when that happened. That then led into us writing blog posts and getting local press, which we'll come back to. And it's about just getting your main points across. Again, just make it easy. Just make it really easy. Make the meeting point easy for the councillors. Our young naturalists wrote a little leaflet to give them so they could take it away, which had all the points on that they'd raised on the walk with them. Those young naturalists knew way more than those councillors did on that walk. And I think they realised that. And it was actually a really impressive thing to do. And the community really got behind it. So politics doesn't always have to be shouting in the room, although sometimes it does. You can do little sort of things like that. So again, it's sort of going back to the events. It sort of ran off the back of the event step. And then through that, from the politics angle, you get your amazing sort of local parties. We now have all the local parties supporting us, which is great. It didn't start that way, but we've ended that way, which was always the goal, which is amazing. And we're really grateful, actually, to everyone that helped us with that. It's been really, really good. And through there, we sort of contacted the GLA. So we had GLA members come and visit the site. They came to our protest. They then asked and raised questions to the Mayor of London for us, which was then upping our campaign and putting it like upper level in the next space. If we hadn't done the species records and the platforms and the community and the events to get to that point, I don't think necessarily just going straight to the GLA, they would have come in. So it's kind of got this like escalation to get to that area. And you suddenly realize that it's not just a sort of local issue anymore. And that was the really interesting thing when we hit that revelation. It started off just being about Southall and Hanwell, and then it became about Ealing. And then actually it became a London issue and then a UK-wide issue, because the climate crisis does affect the whole of the UK. The copse bindweed is going extinct across the whole of the UK, and we have it here. And so then you start to think, actually, that brings in more support. And if we can, you know, make it a sort of UK-wide issue, which we did. And you just need to invite them in. That's the best advice I can give for councillors. Some will disagree with you, some will agree with you, but a lot of the time you want to get yourself in the room, and it's better to be in the room and be firm about what you want than be outside of the room shouting in, I would say. So if you can do that, that's the best way of doing it. That then leads from politics, then you start to be able to generate press, which is point 7. So we have an amazing local press here in Ealing, actually, that covered all of our stories, which then opened also up then to getting interest from regional press. And we have a great press guy on our team, Steve, who does loads. And when we became one of the 10 new parks in CPRE London thing, we had a chat together and we were like, wow, okay, maybe this could be, we could get ourselves on the TV with this. We had a big chat about it. It was like, yeah, because this is London. Again, we were at that point of, expanding. It's like, yeah, it's London based. So we sent an email to BBC and we did a little press release with that. And we said, we're one of the 10 new parks. This is what the 10 new parks campaign is about. We're at Warren Farm. We've got a quarter of London's, not just in Ealing Skylarks, a quarter of London's breeding skylark population here. Would you like to come and do a story on it? I would say, and if Steve was here, he's on holiday, he might correct me, but it took us about a month, 2 months to get that through till we got onto BBC London News. It happened overnight. We got a call and it was like, tomorrow, because so much was going on at the time. They had a sort of quiet news day and they wanted a little story. And they rang us up and I spoke to Kabir. He wasn't free to come and do it. I spoke to CPRE London. No one could get down quick enough for the following morning because we only found out in the evening. And we went and we recorded and we weren't even sure it was going to go on. And I said to them, would you like some recordings from Kabir and CPRE London? They were like, no, we'll just take your recording, but send us any photos. And we sat back and we were like, we've got to make it easy. And we want to keep our messaging going. So I spoke to Kabir and I said, Kabir, quick, make me a 1-minute video on your phone. And I spoke to CPRE London. I was like, quick, make me a 1-minute video about CPRE London and the 10 New Parks campaign. And they sent me the videos. And we sent them the stuff that they wanted, so the wildlife photos and those 2 videos. And went, oh, we're just sending you these as well, in case it's useful, even though they said they didn't want it. And then they ended up using it and they thanked us for it. So it's always about, you always have to go the extra step with everything that you're doing and just make it really, really easy. And it tends to work out. It does tend to work out. And we've been on BBC and Sky since then. And what's been interesting about that is when the councillors started to really notice us. They were like, oh, did you see this on BBC News? They got Warren Farm on BBC News. It was like, they've got reach. And we turned to each other and went, oh, we've got reach. How did that happen? So it's kind of like, you just have to persist. And obviously we have a list now of press people, and they've got to know us. And we send them everything. Even if we think it's not something they're going to want to take, we just drop them a little line, just going, just so you know, this is where we're at now. And they're all really kind, and they all get back to us. And you know, if they get a small news day, which isn't going to happen shortly with the elections, I'm sure of it, but they will take it and they will run with it, which is great. And obviously then that attracts supporters and it creates content, and then you just everyday social media. And lastly, I suppose, as a sneaky 8th point, you just have to repeat all the above. And until it's sort of like, in our case right now, until it's sort of signed and sealed, until Natural England sign that document, we're not over it yet. It's, you know, it's been a huge commitment. They've committed, that's great, but there's still a way to go. We've got to keep it going. We've still got the sports impact to consider that's going on the neighbouring lands now, which is really good of Imperial College to take that step. And we've got our 50th anniversary of the Brent River Park coming up next year. So I would say, while you're doing all of this, it can get very stressful. And it's really important to hold on to your wonderment, why you got involved in it in the first place. Sometimes when you've spent all day tweeting about skylarks, you just have to go up and sit there and listen to them sing, because, you know, just for your own sanity. But I really hope that you can use our campaign as an example in front of your councils to say, hey, look at what's happening here. Look at the attention that it got from making that right decision and the people that backed it. We can do that too. You know, and I really hope that we help set a precedent for other campaigns who are trying to do this thing. But keep at it, and keep your sanity, and eat all the chocolate that you need to get through it. I hope that's helpful. Thank you very much for listening to my TED Talk.
Thank you so much. And I can see from the chat that people are really impressed and have found that very helpful. Just give us one thing that is wonderful about Warren Farm now.
What one thing?
Yeah.
What is the one thing? I think, aside from the skylarks, which is the major thing, it's actually seeing people walk around smiling. People would walk around and do species records, and it was so intense. Rowan and Daniel, who are young naturalists, Rowan, I interviewed him the other day for something we're doing with London National Park City, and I said to him, why are you so, you know, what's your favorite thing about Warren Farm? And he said to me, I would come here every day and I would take species records because I was so afraid of losing what I was looking at. He goes, and now I come here, I'm taking species records because I love it so much and it's being saved. And I said to him, what do you want to do with your future? What does future Rowan do? And he said, oh, I want to be a conservationist. I want to do all these things. And that is what's wonderful about Warren Farm, is that the younger generation are now, you know, who've supported us, who are seeing this, who are getting involved, who are starting school eco clubs, who are coming on walks with us. It benefits them. And the older generation are looking at that going, brilliant. This is what the future needs to be. So it's the community aspect of enjoying it, and the sort of breath of air that everyone is now able to take. That's what's cool about it. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you. Well, thumbs up from all of us, I think, for that.
Thank you.
You've obviously given us lots of detailed messages there, but there seem to be 3 key things. One is that people can't care about what they don't know about. So it's all about information, species records, sharing things, and then people will share that. Secondly, I thought your message, make it easy for people, both your supporters and the media, so make it as easy as possible and be persistent. So I think all 8 of those messages, and the detail you gave us there was brilliant. But I took those 3 messages particularly. So we're going to get a few other contributions. Thank you to people who've indicated. But are there any questions for Katie before we move on? I'm just going to take 5 minutes of questions if we have any before we move on to others. Katie, can we email you?
You can email me, yes. I get a lot of emails, but you can. I'm Katie, Katie, at warrenfarmnaturereserve.co.uk. Had I known when I started this that this was going to get this big, at one point we were hoping, oh, if we get 500 signatures on the petition, that would be great. We're now at 25,000. I would have chosen a shorter email address. But you can also DM me on Twitter and Instagram and all that stuff. That's at Warren Farm NR for Nature Reserve. But yeah, please do.
Okay, we've got a question from Claire Searle, which is about tips on writing a press release. You mentioned that you had a dedicated press person. I think you said John.
Yes, yeah, Steve. Steve is our dedicated press person. Okay. Yeah. So yeah.
Is it possible that people could contact Steve if they wanted advice on press releases?
Yeah, we can sort that out. He is best place to get hold of Steve is Steve STEVE .toft TOFT at brentriverpark.org. Essentially with the press release, he's really good at it. He's really good at press releases. The main thing on the press release is to add a little history at the bottom of it as well about what's going on. No more than like a page and a bit with one photo of the vision, so that it encourages new people who haven't necessarily covered your story yet. They can just at a glance just go, oh, this is what it's about and this is where it is. And oh, they're in CPRE London, and oh, their petition has now hit this. So a little bullet pointed history at the bottom of the press release is really important. But yeah, Steve is definitely the one to talk to about press releases.
Okay, great. And we've got Steve's address now in the chat. What's your Twitter handle?
Well, we've got 2 really. So the one for Warren Farm is at Warren Farm. That's WARREN Farm, FARM, and then NR. So N stands for nature and R stands for reserve. That's the same on Instagram too. On Facebook, we are the Warren Farm Nature Reserve group. It's an open group, so anyone can see it and join it. Okay. And you can follow Brent River Park, which is relatively new. We've just started that as a new website. Membership is free, and that's at Brent River Park. And actually, I'm going to do a shout out for Clean Up the River Brent, which are on at Brent Pollution. That's one of our other trustees, Ben Morris, who's doing loads to clean sewage out of the River Brent. Okay, that's brilliant, and I can see that Alice and John are sticking up these onto the chat. So that's great. Well, thank you very much again, Katie. That has been really helpful. No, thank you for inviting me and for everything that you're doing. It's really amazing what you're doing. We would have been lost without CPRE London. Alice has been, a real amazing person for us. So yeah, thank you very much. Right. Well, thank you for that bit of credit too. And we're, as you can see, Alice is very keen to help people with this. So we've had a few, just a few comments from people who would like to make a contribution. Also, you can see in the chat where the sign up is. So we're intending to have quarterly meetings, but also to produce a quarterly newsletter. So after each network meeting, we'll produce a newsletter which includes information from the speakers that we have. And that'll be an opportunity for other people to make contributions. So if you can let us know if you'd like to produce a short contribution for our newsletter, anybody in the 30 odd people here would be very welcome to contribute to that. So the sign up details are there. So Dave from the National Federation
of friends organisations. You've mentioned a couple of times about the importance of friends groups and given us a link there. Would you just like to say something briefly about the work that you do? And,
so just just wanted to say, well, fantastic! What a fantastic presentation, very inspiring. And there's similar kind of things going on all over the country, and maybe not as high profile and as well organised as you lot, but so I think the 2 points I want to make is, first of all, that we should be, protecting and appreciating and improving our local green spaces all the time, not just waiting until they're under threat. And if we have already organised and we have community involvement and awareness, it's more difficult for those spaces to come under threat. So I think there's a message there about, not waiting until the space is under threat and there's about 7,000 local friends groups already across the UK, and that number could be expanded greatly. And the second thing is that when you are campaigning, it's good to have a positive. It's not just that you're anti-development, but you have a positive, as we've heard, a positive vision for your site. So you can't just be criticised as being antis, And the third thing is that there is a whole, as well as CPRE, this fantastic initiative. There are networks of friends groups and community groups for the whole of London, but also in each borough. And we're really strongly recommending people strengthen their borough networks so that people aren't isolated, and also spaces that are under threat where there's no group or no campaign. There can be a kind of borough-wide awareness that something needs to be done to protect that space. So all in all, great meeting, and let's build our movement until every green space in the country is protected and also has a community group that is championing that space.
Great, thank you. And also in the chat, we've had contributions from Victoria, from Giggle, and also from Marge on the community groups network as well. So again, you can find those in the chat. We had a question from Sarah Benjamin, which was about dealing with pieces of land which are privately owned and have got no trespassers signs on them. Alice has made a connection there to Sarah. But if there's anybody else who's had experience of dealing with that sort of situation, if you could just make yourself known in the chat so that Sarah can get in touch with you. I'd like to come next to Peter Underwood from Shirley Heath and Addington. Peter, you offered to give us a quick update on where you are.
I was just going to say thank you again to Katie for that presentation. You're probably going to be quite jealous because this campaign was really quick, but I just thought passing on that it can be, if you get in at the right place, you can make a big difference straight away. Very quick background. We found out that the mayor in Croydon had been in discussion with the local golf club about giving over a couple of sites which would allow the golf club to take over a third of Shirley Heath to build a driving range and irrigation stuff and things like these. These at the moment are big public sites that would be given over to a private golf club. The golf club had been going out having discussions with residents' associations to try to get them on board. Now, this was clearly all going on behind closed doors. So similarly, I contacted a couple of local journalists, promised one they'd be allowed to break the story as long as they followed it up immediately the day afterwards with the start of the campaign to stop this happening, with a petition that, again, just it's a very simple thing that people can share. And picking up on Katie's points, where I'm incredibly grateful for some sort of key influencer type people, well-known people locally who picked that up and shared it. I mean, I shared it in as many Facebook and social media groups as I could. And very quickly, from launching the petition, it went to about 3,000 people within a couple of days. We got we managed to hit all the right people and lots of people brilliantly sharing it. which got the council to at least, well, they were trying to dismiss it as just rumours. But as the petition grew and more people were talking about this, and we had the evidence to show it wasn't just rumours, by the Monday following, the following week, the mayor was issuing a statement trying to claim that no, this was never going to happen. I was never going to promise it. This was never going to, even though he'd had 2 meetings with them and a site visit, and they'd prepared architectural plans. But anyway, putting that to one side, we went through a lot of the things that Katie's talked about just very quickly in terms of getting press out there, using social media to publicise what was going on, talking about the sites, because they were both metropolitan level sinks, because it's lowland heath. So again, really rare habitat in London. And that even just having a petition, and on the petition I use change.org to set it out. You can set out a really simple case of why these sites are important and why we were against what the plans were and that we should be looking after these sites. And yeah, getting that to the right people. And yes, building up that huge public support that suddenly we got to nearly 6,000 by Monday when the mayor finally issued his letter. So it showed, which again, I'm so grateful for people coming forward, but it shows you've got that residual element there of people who will actually take a stand and say, no, we've got to stop this, and they'll sign the petition. And also contacting their local councillors, contacting MPs, and putting all that pressure on, that we quickly made it appear that it was going to be incredibly difficult for these plans to go any further. And by getting in at that early enough stage, we have, fingers crossed, stopped it. And so I just wanted to pass that on to people as a sort of full of admiration for Katie and the long haul approach. But sometimes if you can get in there quick enough with enough momentum, you can stop these plans before they get too far down the road and make the decision makers realise that the bad plan is just going to face so much opposition. So
thank you, Peter. That's really helpful and encouraging to know it can happen quickly. Could you put some contact details into the chat just for people who'd like to read more about what you've done? If you've got a website or some social media links.
We didn't get that far, but I can put it. If people I can put I will say up front, I'm a politician and it's during an election period, so I'm wary of this. Isn't meant to be political, but all my emails and things are. So, but I'll put them there if people want to contact me. I'm happy to talk in a non-political front.
Can I just jump in quickly and say that is so impressive, and I am totally jealous. You're right. What I would also just say is a little sidebar. When we did the petition through change.org and we got to the point where we hit 10,000 and we wanted to deliver it to the Mayor of London, they initially refused to accept it. And they refused to accept it because change.org is the only petition site where they don't give the email addresses of those that have signed the petition because of GDPR. So they didn't accept it. And then we had to spend 2-3 weeks emailing change.org, where they are based in America, getting back to us and then convincing the people accepting the petition for the Mayor of London to say, change.org have rules in place that do go through and ensure that every signature isn't duplicated, that there aren't multiple fake signatures coming through the same email address or, fake email addresses, and that they have those things in place. That took us a good 2 weeks of going back and forth, panicking that it meant, oh no, because the Mayor of London was on our petition, that we wouldn't be able to deliver it. But we did get there in the end, but it was a bit of a struggle. Other petition sites are available. But if you ever hit that point, hit me up, because we've been there and we've done it.
That is amazing, Katie, because we've just had a question from Claire Searle advising that change.org petitions aren't already accepted. So you managed to anticipate that.
You can push it through, but it does take time, but you can.
And the part of that question was whether having a petition with that sort of number in was helpful in getting press attention. Did you use that to say that, we've hit this milestone now?
Well, yeah, like what Peter just said. I mean, when you start the petition, you tend to get a big initial hit. So we got a few, like 3,000, I think, as well in the first sort of week or so, first few days. And then it sort of peters down and goes anyway, and you think, oh, well, that's it now. And then suddenly just one person will tweet it, oh, whoa, and it'll sort of go up and down, up and down. You definitely, who cares about it are councillors. councillors seeing those numbers going up, they do really care about it. And then I think it just gives you more kudos and a bit more power because you've got voices behind you. And like I said, under this sort of events part of it, you know, those are voters at the end of the day, every single person signing that petition who wants to see it saved. So yeah, it definitely does help give you a voice for sure. Not as quick as Peter's, damn it, but yeah, it does give you
I was
a
going
voice.
to say one of the nice things on this very quick campaign was the initial story is published on Inside Croydon, and it allows comments underneath. And as you say, Katie, some people put annoying and silly, and somebody had put a comment about the fact, oh, nobody cares about these sites. What's all the fuss?
Yeah,
And
there you go.
the editor of the Inside Croydon loved going in, initially replied with 1,000 people have signed the petition, and then about 5 hours later, like 2,000 people have signed it, and he just kept going back in, going, it's 3,000, it's 4,000, and it was just showing, yeah, it's a really good way of just keep triggering it again. So
yeah, exactly, and show that the people for it way outnumber the people that are against what you're doing. And so it's all good. It helps community as well, and people feel like they have a voice, which a lot of people feel disempowered. So
Susan
it's good.
Susan has some experience here. Susan Cusack.
Yes, hi. Just saying, I'm Susan Cusack. I'm part of the Save Wimbledon Park campaign group. We started our petition probably about 18 months ago. We're now on over 18,000 signatures. We first of all delivered it to Wandsworth Council when it had reached 15, or it was probably about 14 at that stage. And they accepted it, and somebody came down and officially accepted it. We took photographs, we put them on social media. And then when it got to 15,000, which I think is sort of the magic number for the GLA, we contacted, it happened to be, we're going to use any councillor who was going to take it from us because we're non-political as well. It happened to be Hina Bakari, who's an environmental, she's in charge of, or in charge of environment on the Assembly for London. And so she was a very good person to actually hand it to, get a photograph of, tag her. She then obviously was very happy to be there and be tagged for something so positive. And obviously since we've delivered that, it's gone up at least another 3,000. And what I've also done is I've kept on, to start with, it was always with Merton and Wandsworth saying, we've reached 5,000, we've reached 10,000, we've reached 12,500. Keep them updated so they know you're still putting the pressure on. And in fact, I'll be writing to them again when hopefully we reach 20,000 so that they know it's still growing, you're still there, you're not going away. And with change.org, exactly what Katie said, you can't see the email, but they now know that it's just for GDPR, and all the emails are change.org. Make sure that it is an actual person with an actual email, so they are taken very seriously. And the petition was mentioned in the officers' report in Merton, in Wandsworth, and at the GLA. So they are taken seriously. So definitely petitions, just keep the pressure up.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Susan. That's very helpful. Right, so we're moving towards a close now. So firstly, a thank you to all the contributors today, but particularly on Warren Farm with some really practical lessons there from Katie. A reminder to sign up for getting automatic notifications about future quarterly meetings, and also to sign up for receiving the future quarterly newsletter. If you'd like to make a contribution to our next newsletter, which Clive is going to be putting together with Alice, please stick your details in the chat or email Alice, and she will link up with you. We'd also like to invite contributions in the same way, either on the chat or with an email to Alice. If you'd like to talk in the future, or if you've got particular thoughts about what we should have on future agendas, we've got two already. So one is we have a lawyer who spoke at our inaugural launch meeting, who's been very actively involved in a number of the campaigns. and she is happy to contribute to our next meeting, particularly to talk about forms of legal redress. And also, a particularly important case precedent in this area was a case in Shropshire, where the campaign was able to force the council to take back a piece of land which they sold. So there's a really interesting precedent there, and we thought it would be really helpful to get them to talk about the work that they've done. Okay, so thank you everybody for your contributions, and for those who weren't contributing but listening and being part of our network. That is really, really useful. Alice, any final words you'd like to say?
I just put the link to sign up in the chat.
I can say it very quickly. Thank you. Brilliant presentation. Look, we're talking to each other who are friends and know what's going on about this problem. Why don't we all share all of our petitions with each other, which will drive numbers to all of the petitions? Really simple. And there must be 30 or 40 groups represented here. And if you spread the word, we'll spread the word.
We'll
Why
take
not?
that on as an action. And yeah, so I put the sign up link in the chat. If you have any problems, just message us at CPRE. I've put my email in the chat a few times as well. We'll leave the chat up there for a minute. So if anyone wants to leave now, thanks again to everybody and to Ian. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all very much indeed.